Yep.
Okay, branding in the arts. There, creating an identity is an art in itself. Presented by me, I'm Michael Pila. Um, there we go. The name of my company is Clicks for Ticks, which is basically drama-free branding for the arts. We want to give your organizations the boost it needs, get your audience out of their house and back into yours. So starting out is, would you buy an incredibly expensive piece of artwork by this man? I mean, just going by looks, would you say this is someone who, whose artwork would excite you? If not, let's take a second look at him, right? This is Andy Warhol. Same guy, right? Andy Warhol started life as Andrew Warholia Jr., actually, was named after his father. He grew up in Pittsburgh. He was famous at being a commercial artist. His first claim to fame was some very, very intricate and exciting drawings of shoes. Interestingly enough, some of these shoes show up in Yellow Submarine, the Beatles animated motion picture. There's some shoe things that are actually based on these designs. So, and Andy changes his name to Andrew, and basically, changes the world. He becomes an influential American artist, a leading figure in the pop movement. He basically comments on celebrity advertising, celebrity cultures, stuff like that. And in the 60s, basically becomes an industry unto himself. There's another young gentleman, Jean-Michel Basquiat, a very young African-American street artist, who basically started graffiti it's part of a duo called Samo. And they were very, very famous for basically graffiti on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. His work was a little bit more political than Warhol's. Warhol's was basically dealing with surfaces. Warhol was basically dealing with fame, celebrity, that kind of stuff. Basquiat was commenting on society, on poverty, on some of the grittier things that were happening in the 60s. Now, interestingly enough, in the 1980s, their dealer suggested that they collaborate. They actually met for dinner. They hit it off very, very well. In fact, there was a play called Collaboration, which just finished its run in New York, which actually was the inspiration for this webinar. So even though they appear to have nothing in common, they both understood how the art scene had changed in the 80s. And what was that change? Okay, so people used to look at the old masters and say, I can't do that. They look at modern art and say, I can do that, I just haven't gotten around to it. So basically the intrinsic value of the art had shifted from the art itself to the artist. The artist is what became important. The art, again, a lot of stuff looked like anybody could do it, so there had to be some other way of valuing this. So Warhol is valuable not because it's a picture of a Brillo box, it's because it's Warhol's picture of a Brillo box. Same deal with Basquiat. So they collaborated over the course of several years on a show. Okay, wait a minute. I'm sorry. Okay. Yeah, so they collaborated over the years. And let me just go back a little. All right. So this is the result of their collaboration. That picture in the lower right-hand corner is actually a double portrait of them that Basquiat literally whipped up upon their first meeting. The first they met, Warhol, of course, took a Polaroid of the two of them. Basquiat took the Polaroid back to his studio, and within hours, the painting, according to Warhol, was still wet. Within hours, he comes back with that painting. Warhol was always interested in logos, in advertising, and basically, consumerism. And as you can see, Basquiat added his touch to the logo. So This was this basically the fruit of their collaboration. So when we get back to the quote, but basically the art, the value of the art had transferred from the art itself to the artist, and artists started to become brands. It was the brands that were selling, not so much the art. So when organizations have similar names, brand identity is crucial to getting their message across. We have 3 examples of that in New York City. We have the Met, which is the Metropolitan Museum of Art. We have the Met, which is the Metropolitan Opera. And of course, we have the Mets, which is the baseball club out in Queens. Interestingly enough, they all have the name Metropolitan in their title. So just keeping that straight is crucial, especially if you're buying tickets. I mean, you don't want to wind up in left field if you're expecting to go to Traviata. So why do the arts need branding? Well, internet access, smartphones, what have you, have made what they have more and more accessible, which is good and a bad thing. Basically, they can spread their message wider and faster, but at the same time, they need to convince people to come and visit. They need to convince people to come and donate money, and this has created a lot of competition. They need to overcome the effects of COVID, which a lot of them are still struggling through. People are a little hesitant to leave their homes. People are a little bit afraid of catching something, or people have just basically got out of the habit of either going to a play or even a movie. They're basically they've gotten used to seeing things at home, and the imperative to go out isn't as strong as it used to be. Organizations need to show what they stand for, right? They need to have a reason for being. So it's not just enough to mount an exhibit or put on a production. There has to be some rationale for the organization, especially if they're looking for some kind of donor support. And finally, the art market itself is sort of fragmented. There are a lot of specific groups, each with specific organizations that cater to the needs or cater to the desires of specific groups. Among their gender groups, there are religious groups, groups built around race, groups built around regions, and also groups built around new work by artists. So branding is a valuable tool for the arts. Now, how does that work? It's more than just a pretty logo. So it's more than just merchandising. I've run into a number of people who said that what they do is merchandising, and actually what they say they do is branding. And basically what they're doing is merchandising. So branding is a lot more than putting your logo on a pencil. A successful brand communicates the organization's mission. As we said before, you have to stand for something, and a lot of that feeds into appealing to a target audience. You need to create a unifying voice and message throughout your communications. Art organizations are in the unusual position of having, on one hand, to promote specific projects or works or what have you, at the same time needing to create an overall look for their brand, so that those specific exhibits are related back to them. So it doesn't look like they just do that doesn't look like they just do several plays or several exhibits during the year. All of those exhibits track back to one organization. And again, that's crucial for donations. Branding also brings in extra people. It widens your target audience. It brings in extra people and generates more publicity. So I'm going to review several successful brands. We're going to take a quick look at what they're doing, what's different about them, and how they arrived to where they are now. So I'm starting off with the big one. We're starting off with the Met, the Metropolitan Museum of Art. I'm sure everybody's familiar with this. It's basically been around for over 100 years. It has a very wide-ranging collection, going back very, very years. Their mission is to basically connect people through art through the ages. Now the logo, this is their new logo. Their old logo was sort of almost like a Da Vinci type diagram. The new Glow logo was very, very controversial when it first came out in 2016, because it sort of looks like it's a lot more simpler than the old logo was. It's in a way it's a little bit more less sophisticated, if you will. So the rationale behind the logo was they wanted to focus on the colloquial name of the museum, which is the Met, instead of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. So everybody calls it the Met, so they wanted to focus in on that. The font they used is hand-drawn on purpose, again, to track back to the fact that they are an established art museum going way back. The letters are connected to show the connectivity of art. And they basically chose this very, very distinctive red color that stands out in any situation and is easy to basically, identify with the Met. So this is a sample of their branding system. You see it's a combination of old and new. So the system is flexible enough to integrate their parts of their existing collection, but it's also striking enough to be identified with the Met. The new branding system is very, very, very identifiable with the Met. I refer to this as sort of an elegant freshness, because it still looks elegant. It still looks, like it has some gravitas. At the same time, there's a certain freshness. I don't want to go so far as to say timeliness to it, but it does look very modern, which sort of got away from the sort of branding they did before this. This is a look at their signage, and you can see it ties everything in very, very well. It even ties in the building. I mean, I think the building is sort of part of their brand. This very impressive edifice that has been evolved over the years is very much part of New York. It's very identifiable with the city, and it's very, very identifiable with the organization. Next, we have MoMA, the Museum of Modern Art. And basically their mission is a deeper understanding and enjoyment of modern art by a diverse local, national, and international audience. So they are the champions of modern art. Oddly enough, a lot of the art that is modern is like 100 years old, because that's how long they've been in the business. And again, they have a very distinctive logo, they have a very distinctive name, and they've decided to key on that, to leverage that. So their design system is built around their logo, but in a somewhat different way. Whereas the Met has made the logo the centerpiece of their overall branding, the MoMA is actually using their logo everywhere in their communication. The logo almost forms a grid that they use to then add photos, add color, add other fonts. So again, the idea here is to create a very modern, very lively, very colorful, very engaging brand, that at the same time is readily identifiable as MoMA. Yes, this is everything. Yes, right. So as you can see here, their brand is basically based around this grid where they can include all these images. They also put a lot of effort into signage. Again, keeping with the same grid, using the MoMA typeface. The MoMA font is the basis of all their typographical choices. And they do a lot of outdoor display. They do a lot of large displays against their buildings. So again, it's a very, very dynamic use of their brand. It's not just something you would find, say, in the gift shop. It's basically permeates every part of the museum. Next, we have a pretty interesting one. This is the Asian Art Museum. It's in San Francisco. It's the largest collection of Asian art in the world. What is sort of distinctive about them, again, is their logo. And the logo is this upside down A. First of all, it sort of indicates a new way of looking at things. Let's just move on to the next one. They use their upside down A in just about everything they do. The point of the upside down A is that it's a new way of looking at things. It's also a mathematical symbol for everything. And they use the hollowness, as it is, the emptiness of the A, to change it. So basically they fill in the A with different either images or colors or what have you. Sort of like this. What we have, the picture in the middle there is a sculpture of the A that is in front of the building. And again, it's a very identifiable mark. It's something that unifies all of their communications. And it also gives them an opportunity to utilize parts of their collection as part of their brand, which is something I think is extremely important, that the actual art shows up at the brand to sort of, meld that connection. Okay. Moving on. Next, we have the Public Theater. Now, the Public Theater started 60 years ago. The rationale of the Public Theater was to make theater accessible to everyone. Theater to some extent still does have an opportunity, have a reputation of being somewhat stuffy, for being only for people with high education, only for people with a certain from a certain income strata. And the whole point of the public was to democratize theater. And this is their branding system. You can see very, very liberal use of a sort of aggressive typography, and there's a reason behind that. The blockiness of the typography, the sort of geometric layout of the pages, and even the yellow one there, the one that's with the gentleman in the middle of it, is again is very busy. It's very, very aggressive. It's so the point here was to create a look that is sort of a formalization of graffiti. The idea is to sort of have the same feeling as street graffiti, but in a somewhat more sophisticated form. And I think that really comes across. If you look at their stuff that way, that really comes across. It looks like, it looks very, very, very different from the stuff we've seen from the modern, and even different from the stuff we've seen from MoMA. So this is basically art and theater for the people. These are some more samples. And I also get from them a sense of fun. There's sort of a sense of fun in a lot of the things they do. So their entire everything they do sort of supports their mission of accessibility. Next, we come to the Atlantic Theater Company. This is another very interesting one. Now, the Atlantic Theater Company, they have a very simple mission. They basically want to, promote theater. A lot of what they promote is new works. Their logo is actually is inspired by that A shape of the first letter of their name, and they use that in many, many creative ways throughout their branding. They use the flag. They use it on their on all their publications. What's interesting about them is that they're since a lot of what they do is new, they don't always have photography. They don't always have illustration. They don't have art ready. A lot of the artwork would be still in production while they still need to promote the plays. So their design system is built around found art. So they use a lot of found art, a lot of stock art, a lot of art that's readily available, a lot of clip art basically, and they use it in a very, very imaginative way. They do the same thing with typography. And again, it works very, very well as both ways. It's a unifying element, and it also allows them to feature individual productions. Okay, next we're moving on to the Women's Place Theater. As you might suspect, it is a theater that focuses on the works of women authors. By the way, if there's any questions or comments, we're moving along pretty rapidly here. So if there's anybody has anything they want to add to this as I'm speaking, please feel free to pipe up. What I found really interesting about the Women's Theater is, and again, this is their branding system, very bright red color, very, very warm color, black and white photos. It's a very, very flexible design system, as I'll get into that in a moment. What I found most interesting about their branding is that it's sort of like it's not the stereotypical feminine brand. You wouldn't necessarily think, you know, a place for women, as it were, would be this aggressive. But they have a very clean square typeface. They're using bright colors. So it's again, it's not what I it's not what I would immediately assume a place like this would have. They've come up with a really interesting, if you can see the wavy lines behind the women there, maybe have some more over here. So the wavy lines, again, is a very, very interesting design motif that they use liberally to tie things together. All of the photos of women are silhouettes. So again, it allows for a lot of design flexibility. At the same time, it sort of sets them apart from everyone else. And it's almost like they're saying, catch the wave, you know, that there's a wave of women authors coming, and you know, here they are. Okay. Okay, we now come to the second Metropolitan in our group here, the Metropolitan Opera. And again, their mission is to create a deeper appreciation of opera. They've been around forever. So their branding system makes liberal use of their content. As you can see through the posters, and you can see the branding material at the end there. So they use very clean typography. They use very, very high-end photos. They have a simple grid for their posters that can accommodate just about any kind of production, and at the same time, it's all unified as being from the Met. The thing they do that I find interesting is the way they use their building. Their building is part of their overall branding system. They basically use the building as a billboard. You know, I don't know if you've ever spent any time in Lincoln Center. There's a lot of outdoor advertising. There's a lot of banners hanging off of buildings. So they're sort of integrating their advertising into the neighborhood. I don't know how much like walk-in traffic they get, to be honest with you. I mean, this as far as I know, a lot of their sales are subscription driven, but they still basically created a presence for themselves, you know, within the city. And like the Met, their building is a big part of what they do. All right. So now what can we learn from all this? You know, what lessons can we pick up from this? So what does it take to create a brand for an arts organization? Okay. First off, art organizations must address the central issue of how do you promote individual works and still maintain your brand consistency. I once was working on a nonprofit theater. I had pitching a job for a nonprofit theater, and this was actually a question that the marketing director asked me. You know, that shouldn't we be promoting the organization over the production? And actually, this was the Paper Mill Playhouse, which is a fairly prominent theater company or theater venue in New Jersey, and a lot of lately they've sort of been the like an out-of-town tryout venue for Broadway. So they basically get a lot of really great stuff there. And I basically told her that no one buys a ticket for a play because it's good for them. That yes, you want people to support your organization, but I think you need to sell them on the art first. And I think once they realize the type of art that they are promoting, or the kind of art that they're supporting, I think then basically you can ask them for donations. But starting out by asking for donations is just sort of putting the cart before the horse. Next thing you have to ask yourself is, what is your mission? What is your organization doing that your competition does not? What is it that you do better, or it's just simply different? Basically, every art organization has started with a particular reason. That reason has to come through in the branding. That has to be intrinsic to the brand. And a lot of that has to do with attracting the desired target audience. A big question I ask people is, does your branding align with your mission? Your messaging, are you giving people the same message throughout, or are you sort of mixing your signals a little bit? But who is your target audience? Art organizations by definition have a built-in audience. Are you doing enough to attract them? Are you doing enough work to appeal to them, to keep them coming back? And as we keep saying lately, to get them to come out of the house, basically. How can art organizations best leverage their content? Again, by definition, they are content creators. And I'm a big believer, as we've seen with the examples I've shown here, the successful ones integrate the content into their brand. So it basically becomes part of what the organization is about. Who are your competitors? Everybody has competitors. So who are your particular competitors? Who is also going after the same audience you are? For instance, in New York, we have 3 nonprofit theaters. We have the Manhattan Theater Club, we have the Roundabout Theater, and we have the theater at Lincoln Center. And they're all subscription-based businesses. They are all going after the same people. So, how do they differentiate themselves? How do they subdivide that market so that they all get a piece? Finally, how will you stand out and claim your niche in the marketplace? What are you going to do basically to get attention? What are you going to do to cut through the clutter? Is it color? Is it some sort of intrinsic design? Is it some sort of specific typography? Maybe now is it a use of a lot of video? How are you going to basically keep people's attention? And finally, I think you have to ask yourself, is your brand still relevant? Is it dated? Is it tired? Or is it just plain stale? I mean, when was the last time you looked at your branding material? When was the last time you looked at your branding material against what's happening in the world? Looked at it against what your competitors are doing? Does it still serving your organization? Does it still serve your purposes? So I like to say a lot of this comes down to reminding your audience, especially after COVID, a lot of this comes down to reminding your audience what they love about art, and basically reestablishing the connection, that they had before COVID, where they didn't even think about, attending a show or going to a museum. And now, let's overcome that hesitancy by sort of tapping into their passion. So that's the end of my presentation for today. Ending a little earlier than expected, but are there any questions, comments?
I'll jump in, Michael, out of curiosity. Sometimes
Yes.
it feels so, from the outside looking in, it feels so subjective to what's a good design, what's a good brand.
Mm-hmm.
And especially for historic institutions like the Met, there
Uh-huh.
will be an element of the regulars that go, oh, I liked it the old way because I knew that and I liked it and it's comfortable. How do you, when you've just sort of signed off at the end there to say, you know, is it old, is it dated? At what point do you think it's old and dated if it's something that's like a comfortable shoe that you just want to put on and wear? I'll give you an example. Years ago, you'd go to the Louvre in Paris, and it's the most stunning building that's about
Right, yeah, been there, yeah.
500 years old. It's,
Right.
and they went and shoved that great big pyramid in the middle, the glass pyramid, and everyone was like,
Mhm.
oh, you can't do that. And it grew on us. And now it's like, it would be weird if we didn't have the glass pyramid in the middle of that courtyard. Same with the Eiffel Tower. It was a good 100 years before people started saying, this is amazing. Before it was like, it's a monstrosity.
Right.
So it's like how, when you've got a smaller organization, maybe you're running a ballet school. So for my friend, at least, she's got a production company that has a theme of Victorian music hall. A
Right.
lot of the shows, they're resurrecting old shows and they're telling the stories of these people that were around in Victorian era. So she travels the country doing that.
Mm-hmm.
How do you kind of know when it's time to modernize, and how do you know when it's time to kind of sit with what everybody already knows?
Well, I think I think people start taking you for granted. I mean, the two examples you gave of the, you know, the pyramid at the Louvre and even the rebranding of the Met, you know, caused a lot of buzz that they weren't having before, you know.
Right.
And I think it caused a lot of people to take a second look at them. And even if people didn't particularly like it, at least reminded them that, oh yeah, the Met's there. And maybe I don't like the new logo, but you know, I love the European painting wing. I haven't been there in 2 years, you know, let me go take a look at that. And the same thing with the Eiffel Tower. It's like, yeah, you know, maybe it's not so bad. I should go take a second look at it. Because I think once something becomes that comfortable, you know, it does become like part of the landscape, and people just either take it for granted or just don't know it's there. Then there's the question of attracting new people, expanding your audience, expanding your followers. People who don't know you may assume they do. So people who are not familiar with your organization may just assume, oh, we know everything they do. There's really no us to go, you know, there's nothing exciting happening there. There's really no reason to go check them out. And it might even get to the point that they forget you're there. But doing something dramatic like a rebranding, you know, especially a really overhaul, you know, I mean, gets you a lot of publicity, puts you in touch with a lot of people who've either forgotten about you, or in some cases, in cases of smaller organizations, may never have heard of you.
Yeah.
So this gives them a reason to check out. And I also think that branding needs to be followed up by some sort of a you know, campaign, you know, some sort of a special, you know, special series of shows, a special series of exhibits, you know, special memberships, special something. Because now that you've got people's attention, you know, you want to get them in the door. Or online, you know, a lot of organizations are presenting. We didn't get into that here, but a lot of organizations are presenting more and more stuff virtually. You know, which is kind of like the you know, for some people that's the first step to actually visiting the museum. You know, they can access you a lot easily virtually, and it's a way to reach a new audience, to get your new message out there, and to create some buzz. I mean, I think a lot of, especially in the case of museums, I think a lot of museums are just seen as very sleepy places, where like, you know, sleepy people go. I can't think of any other way, but basically they don't necessarily generate a lot of excitement. You know, I can imagine even the Museum of Sex, you know, only generates a minimal amount of excitement. So this is sort of a good way to sort of make that happen. You're right, there is a certain amount of subjectivity to it, but there's also a certain amount of subjectivity to art. And I think what you want to do is you're attracting people who have similar tastes, similar attitudes as you do. You know, you're not necessarily want the world to show up. You're not necessarily doing mass marketing, as it were. Basically, what you're doing is you want to ferret out the people who are predisposed to like what you have up there, and connect with them. That's where you want to build your relationship.
So how often would you think a rebrand would be fruitful?
I get it. It depends. I wouldn't do it too often, maybe every 10 to 15 years, and more than that, it's, like I hear people complain, like every 2 years on Broadway, there's a revival of Death of a Salesman. And it's like, how many times do we want to see Death of a Salesman?
Yeah.
They keep changing the cast and everything. I mean, it's the same play. So, you want to space it out enough so that people, I think you want to wait till it gets to that sleepy point, where you get the feeling that people are ignoring you a little bit and you're not getting the buzz you used to get. Maybe you're not getting the talent you used to get. I mean, it's another thing we didn't get into, but it's a great way to attract new talent, either artistic talent or playwrights or what have you. They want to be where the action is. So it's another way of showing them where that action, exists.
Wouldn't another time for considering rebranding be if the organization, after doing some studies, et cetera, realized that perhaps they weren't attracting the audience they wanted to attract, or they wanted to broaden their audience, that something, or perhaps their programming changes? Those might be perhaps other reasons for considering a rebranding.
Definitely, yeah. And again, that's for a brand that may have been around for decades. And again, either people are taking you for granted, or you sort of lost touch with your core audience, or like you said, you've changed your programming to the point where it doesn't quite resonate with your core audience as well as it used to. Anything else? I mean, the ones that actually impressed me the most were the Atlantic Theater Company, because it's almost totally abstract, basically using, again, found imagery and playing off the A shape. I thought that was kind of a fun thing to do. And it's a lot more versatile than I ever thought it was. I really liked what the Public Theater did with sort of elevating graffiti. To not so much elevating graffiti, but they were basically creating the same sense, the same feel of graffiti, but in a somewhat more formal way. I thought that was a really clever way to pull that off. Now, I also discovered that a lot of these brands were done by the same design company. They go Pentagram, which started in London, and I think they have a New York office. And I think both Mets, not the baseball club, but both Mets, and were done by Pentagram. The Public Theater was done by a designer named Polish Scher, who worked at Pentagram. So they have a particular design aesthetic that I think make some of these things look somewhat similar, which is why I like the Atlantic Company, because I thought that was really a really standout brand. And for some reason, the color red shows up a lot. I noticed that's just sort of a left hand, just sort of a minor observation. Did anybody here did any of these brands resonate with anybody more than others? Did anybody have any favorites out of what we looked at? Or?
I think for me, you used American examples, so I don't know what the originals look like. So I'm not really aware. So the Met for me looked like a newspaper with the red, because that's my sort of background. But I wonder whether they used red because of John Constable used to always have a bit of red in his landscapes, even if it wasn't there, he would put it there because it's something that draws the eye. It's a color that's known to draw the eye.
Right.
And bearing in mind they've got that beautiful building and you've got the two red strips going down, that is just, you
Right,
want to
very
walk in,
dramatic.
don't you? You want to go down the door in the middle.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. Color is so powerful, isn't it?
Yes, right. They did, again, doing research on this, they did, red is a color that does show up a lot. And in this
Mhm.
particular type of red, it's sort of a royal red that shows up in a lot of Renaissance paintings. It shows up in a lot of classical work. So I think they were sort of keying off of that, sort of communicating the classical end of their collection and marrying that with the somewhat informal logo. I mean, that was kind of like the problem, the logo. It just looked a little too informal for such an institution that people hold in such high regard.
Mm. How do you go about choosing colors then for a smaller company that doesn't have those kind of problems?
Well, I mean, color can be very subjective. I think you want to take a look at the landscape you're in. I think you want to see basically what are your competitors doing. You want to stand out from them. Are there colors that are certain that are intrinsic, or are there colors that sort of intrinsic to the collection you have? You know, like I was looking at there's an LGBT museum that I couldn't include everything in this, but basically, and they were using like a lot of bright greens. They were using a lot of neon colors, obviously, to set themselves apart. So a lot of neon, so pinks, neon greens, you know, very, very vibrant, striking colors to basically identify themselves with their audience, but also to make a very definite separation between them and the other museums out there.
I have a question.
Yes.
If you're working with a small arts organization that doesn't have, or that hasn't budgeted for a big rebrand or can't
Right.
afford, is it Pentagram or something like that?
Right, yeah, those guys.
Where would you suggest they start? Can you do a partial rebrand? Can you just do a logo, or does it need to be the full thing? Otherwise, it's not going to make the big impact that you want.
Yeah, you can do it in
bare
stages.
bones you can do for a rebrand when you're not one of these big organizations.
Yeah, I mean, you can certainly do it in stages. You know, for instance, you may not want to start by changing the logo. You may want to start by creating some sort of flexible design system that you can use throughout the organization that would take advantage of past work while still being flexible to accommodate new work. And then depending on how that goes, then, you know, you may use that information to inform the redesign of the logo. Or sometimes you want to just refresh the logo. You just want to make it, you know, you want to keep the same feel, the same identity. Maybe you just want to update it a little bit. Again, either change a color, change a typeface, just do something to make it look fresher, you know, without going through the entire branding experience, you know. Smaller organizations do have the advantage of having like fewer people involved in the branding process. You know, you probably don't have a huge board of directors, you know. I don't know if you realize, but in New York City just finished redoing the I Love New York logo. Yeah, you should look this up. So I Love New York has now become We Love NYC. And the We Love NYC, the font is a very square serif face. So it's sort of like the opposite. Milton Glaser originally used American typewriter, which was very curvy and sort of informal, but, you know, not messy, as it were, but very. So they basically redone the logo. They kept the heart. Oh yeah, they made the heart sort of three-dimensional. So they sort of like put some shadow on the heart. And it's really terrible. It's really awful. And like the design community is up in arms. I don't know if anybody else, you know, But the original logo, the I Love New York logo, really became, I mean, it's done for New York State, but it became very, very identified with New York City. So, you know, a lot of us are wondering, why couldn't they just change the wording, or, you know, add a C to NY, or just basically just leverage what people loved and already recognized, and just modify it slightly. They wanted to get across the idea that it's not about I loving New York, it's about we working together loving New York, which is a great idea, but nobody's talking about that. They're all talking about how they butchered the logo. No, they probably should have just come up with something completely different.
It doesn't look right, does it? I've just had a look. It looks weird.
Right? No, but I mean, the thing is, they could have come up with something different. They could have just, let's try it. Apparently it took them 2 years to create this thing, which has everybody wondering, what were they doing? Like what? Whenever I see this, I always ask myself, like, what were the ones that were rejected? Like, if this was the best they had, what didn't make the cut?
And do you know the company that did it?
I just read the article this morning, and it's of course the person who did it is I hate when people do this. So they're basically going, oh, this is all great, we're getting all this publicity, because even though people at least people are talking about it, but it's kind of like, I don't know if anybody remembers the new Coke, when Coca-Cola changed its formula in the 80s, and they kind of backtracked. They went back to the old Coke, although there was a rumor that they've been quietly slipping the new Coke into the old Coke can. So that's like, it's like a whole cola conspiracy going on here. But what happens is, well, it's the same excuse that, even though people hate it, at least they're not ignoring it. But I don't really think that works. I think they hate it. And I think if you do something that just reminds you of how better something else looked, or how better something else performed, that doesn't necessarily do you any favors. I think you should try to get it right on your own.
Graham Clifford. Okay.
There he is. Yes, he's very happy. But what else are you going to say? She probably got paid like $2 million to do this.
Well, I would imagine with the press, he's laying low at the moment. He's keeping.
If you're smart, yes. If you're smart, you go on vacation. And apparently, like, the mayor's been getting heat on this.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah. And it's interesting. And it's Glazer didn't die too long ago. I think it was less than a year ago. He passed away. So he's still sort of a presence in the city. And he's one of the few graphic designers to sort of become a pop star. Most people couldn't name a graphic designer if their life depended on it, but most people know who Glazer is. So it's sort of sad that they kind of butchered one of his. I saw him speak once at the Art Directors Club, and he was actually a little annoyed. He said what did he call it? He called this piece of graphic ephemera, that he whipped up in the back of a cab. He said it kind of, with all the things he's done in his career and with his life, that this is the one thing that everybody knows him for. Like, this is sort of like his crowning achievement. Really kind of ticked him off a little bit. I mean, he really felt like he wasn't getting his due, So. He also, for some reason, spoke with a fake English accent. You wanted to sound sophisticated. So I don't really, it was a little, like, because I heard him speak a couple of times. The last time I heard him speak, he had an English accent. And it's like, where did that come from? But he's an interesting character. Okay, so we're almost at we got like a few minutes left. I keep coming back to that idea of remind people what they love. I think that's like a very, very strong way to approach this. That organizations get caught up in subscribers and in financial issues and the creative issues of individual projects. But I think when it comes to the audience, the audience go to museums and plays and what have you, because they like them, basically because and a lot of people, they're passionate about the art, even though they're not artists themselves. And I really think that's something not enough places tap into enough. I think a lot of them are more concerned with their own superficials, and don't necessarily try to grab the audience, by the heart. So anyway, I want to thank you all for showing up today. I hope you got something out of this. I'm available for questions or whatever, please feel free to email me any questions or comments you might have. And I will make this available somehow. I usually pass around a PDF of the presentation, but since it's recording, I could send a link to the actual video, and you can relive this morning with at any time with anyone. So just break it out on the anniversary of every March 22nd. You can just break out the webinar and remember where you were. So anyhow, okay. Once again, thank you all for coming, and I look forward to hearing from all of you.
Thank you.
Okay, right. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Michael. Great
Okay.
information. Appreciated it. Thank
Sure.
you very much.
Okay, bye.
Michael,
Take care.
see you soon.
Bye.